Got it.
Greetings.
Hi.
My name's Philip and I'm here with Paul today. Thank you so much for being present. I'm so grateful for you joining us today, Paul. It's been a long time coming. I'm very grateful to be able to have converse and share with such an astrologer of such stature. How do you do, sir?
I'm alive, but what did you call me, Paul?
Oh God, Steve. I've been doing this all day. It's because I know you, Steve.
It's Paul. I'll kill him.
Do you know Paul?
No.
I used to work with a Paul Judd, and you. So this is years ago, though. I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago.
I have a cousin called Paul Judd.
Do you want to start again?
Yeah.
It's funny because I keep doing it in my head, and I know you very well because I watched you so many times. It's embarrassed me. I've got sweat. But the funny thing is, I never spoke to that guy before. Like it was just like someone I worked with.
Before we start that, because we're going to start again, it's great we swap charts, and you know not to talk. I'm not going to talk about my personal life.
Yeah.
There's nothing I won't talk about.
I wouldn't have asked if it was your brother like that. Like if it was just because it threw me through a loop that I did it.
But if there's anything that comes up that I'm uncomfortable talking, I will shut it down straight away. I would just say that I don't want to talk about that, and I would expect you to be comfortable with that.
Of course, that's cool.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's start again.
Do you want to? Yes. Do you want to stop recording your end, and then we'll start again? Greetings. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful for your presence. I've got a fantastic colleague and brilliant astrologer to converse and connect with today. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve Judd. How do you do, sir?
I'm alive, well, and happy. Thanks for having me here.
Well, I'm very pleased to be able to connect. It's been a long time coming. I've been watching your work on YouTube for what feels like probably over a decade, to be honest. I don't know when. Do you know when you started making and sharing astrological content on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it was around August 2010. It might have been 2011. I think it was 2010, and I started it as a joke. So I must think, why don't you put a video on YouTube? Because I've been doing lots of phone line stuff and audio recordings for clients about stuff, and they said, well, put something on YouTube. And I went, all right, I'll give it a go, see what happens, and it just took off.
You're a pioneer, and you've laid the paving for many people to come and to follow and to gain confidence into sharing this channel and to opening up their own stream of consciousness through the practice of astrology and speaking about it.
See, that's a nice compliment. And a lot of people have said stuff like that to me. And I don't quite see it like that. It's lovely to be thought of by some people. And it's very sort of gratifying for my ego. But at the end of the day, I do astrology because I love it and it loves me. I don't see astrology as being an it. I see it as being a she. People don't find astrology. Astrology finds people. Astrology found me long ago, and I kind of worked with it, stroke her, all these years. And every opportunity I've been given, I've taken. So I don't see myself in any role as a pioneer or teacher. I just see me as doing something that I absolutely love. I'm very lucky to be able to make a living out of my passion, although it's taken me 40 years to actually make any serious, to even get to the point where I'm not in debt anymore. And I wouldn't recommend anyone else to do it. But I only started doing it publicly on YouTube because I genuinely wanted to bring astrology into the world. If you talk to people who knew me back in the 70s, when I started studying, they'll tell you that I used to say, I wanted written on my gravestone, he wanted astrology to be taught in schools. Because I figure if astrology were taught in schools, within 2 generations, we'd have an end to all types of warfare, especially religious warfare. And the whole world would be in a much better psychological state of self-awareness and self-knowledge. But then the internet happened. And I became aware that I had this potential to put astrology stuff out there into the world without going through formal and rigorous educational protocols. So in a way, without meaning to, I've been putting astrology stuff out there, and it's been helping other people get the confidence to put their stuff out there and to learn about and to bring astrology into the world, which has got to be a good thing.
Definitely. I feel like you're an ambassador for astrology, and I really appreciate
that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. It's a bit like laying the foundation down and being open to be able to share it, because you know, it could be that it said that we have to go through this rigorous protocols to learn a certain thing, but I feel like we can gain our information from different ways. Everyone's got different learning styles. But let's go back to the beginning, if this is okay. And so you've been an astrologer for maybe what, 25, 30 years before you started sharing on YouTube. What was your media of choice to share astrology prior to that? Were you writing in columns, or like how was you connecting with clients? What was your main stream of revenue to be able to make people aware that you were a resource yourself? Because astrologers are resourceful. Anybody who's got a craft that they love and they're passionate about, they're a resource.
I joined the army when I was 15. That was in 1970. The army quickly worked out that I wasn't very good at driving tanks or anything like that. So they ran a set of intelligence tests on me and found out I was very good with codes and ciphers and languages that weren't Latin based. I was good at Sanskrit and Cyrillic and stuff like that, where it was different symbols. So when I left the army, when I was 20 in late 1975, I found astrology in spring 77. And someone showed me an ephemeris, and I saw the list of planets across the top and the list of dates by the side and all the numbers like a bus timetable in the middle. And I thought, wait a minute, there's patterns there. This is pattern recognition. And that's how I got into it, when I saw the patterns, like the schedules, if you like, of the planets in the sky. And I realized that there were ever-changing patterns there. So I started just doodling with it, but I didn't really start doing astrology properly until, although I discovered it in 77, I didn't start doing it properly till 1980. And even then I got the first 15 or 20 charts wrong, because I didn't know about the time changes or British summertime. So I didn't do my first chart properly till 1981. And then I was only doing it for friends and for colleagues and for family, and just to experiment, because anyone who wants to learn astrology, the simplest way to do it is just do as many charts as you possibly can, because practice makes perfect. And people started giving me sort of food or money or payment in some kind around the mid-80s. And then around the late 80s, I started charging a bit more seriously, although I was still working for myself in other areas. And I was a marble and mosaic ceramic tiler. I was doing swimming pools and big bathrooms and things like that. But then my knees gave out in 1999 when I was in my mid-40s. So I thought, well, the only thing I can do now is astrology. So I went onto the phone lines. And then for the next 4 years, I was cutting my teeth on the phone lines. And when you're on the phone lines and you're waiting for the phone calls to come in, you're doing sort of 20 or 30 5 to 10 minute phone conversations a day, 4 to 5 days a week, and they're on the phone and they're paying top dollar. So you've got literally 5 seconds from the moment you start speaking to them to get their chart up on your screen, because I got my first computer in 98 and I got my first software in 98, 99. And so when you're doing that many charts in a short space of time, over a period of time, it really makes you super sharp. You have to be sharp, acute, and quick. Otherwise, they just hang up. And so I did. I was doing 1,000, 1,500 readings a year. They were only 10-minute readings. But when I left the phone lines in 2003, that's when I really went into just doing individual readings for clients at a much longer, thorough basis. And since that time, well, since the late 90s, doing readings has been my only source of income. So it's been a gradual progression. YouTube happened in 2010, 2011. And then I started teaching properly my own style of astrology a couple of years ago. And that's just gone ballistic. And yeah, there's various books that are out now or in the pipeline. So the only thing I'm worried about is the fact I'm getting old, just at the point where I'm becoming successful, I'm getting old, which happens to us all. But I want to get as much knowledge out there into the world as I possibly can, whilst I'm still able to do so.
Yeah, it's a
pretty summary of what I've done.
It's brilliant. It's fantastic. And so do you feel like, as you've been able to relax into being able to trust that astrology will provide for you, in a sense, do you feel that correlates with regards to the collective consciousness accepting astrology as well? So they're being more open to it in the popular culture and such.
Well, there's two questions in one there. Does astrology provide for me? Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit flippant with it. I describe astrology as a she because I consider her to be my mistress, or when I'm feeling sanctimonious, my goddess. But somehow, by using astrology, I've always been able to put food on the table, clothes on my back, roof over my head, cash in my pocket. There's always been enough. Never as much as I want, always what I need.
That's just a very important. So I have a question which is quite straight to the point with regards to inclusive within this barometer, and that is, so did she, astrology, demand a certain rigmarole of you with regards to certain, you must do your due diligence in a certain area so that then people will buy into your product? For instance, say you have to buy clothes, or you have to get a certificate, or you have to get a website, a few things,
There are, if you're going to, if you want to make it as an astrologer, it stands to reason that you have to be trusted by your clients. Otherwise, they will come to you once and that'll be that, and they won't come back. If they're going to trust you, then it stands to reason that you need to be able to put certain qualities into your readings, such as authenticity, dignity, loyalty, and trust. That helps that I've got the moon in Sagittarius, because these are qualities that are associated with the moon in Sagittarius. But what comes first, the chicken or the egg? What comes first, the chart or the astrologer? You know, you can get caught in semantics on that way. But yes, my clients know me as being someone who's a straight shooter and who will tell them the truth, even when they do. There's so many astrologers out there these days who are, many of them are what I call pretty young things of of many different genders in this day and age, who are so full of bovine scatology, I call it, right? Who just basically just say exactly what they think that people out there want to hear. And they're very good on YouTube, but they have very few clients because they don't have the authenticity to be able to walk their talk and speak their truth the way that a proper astrologer should, in my opinion.
So you mean if you might see something, or you might have a client who's dealing with something, and you've got to walk them through the process. You can't just spiritually bypass with these people.
Yes, and it's really important. I was speaking to another astrologer a few weeks ago, and he was asking me, well, would you go through this process? Would you go on a sort of shamanic journey with your clients? I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You cannot get him for the client values you as an astrologer primarily for your capacity to be objective, detached, and impersonal, to give your best from a detached perspective. If you start getting involved at any level with your clients, you lose that detachment. Now, some clients over the years, those who have been with me for more than a decade, 15, 20 years, they've got my kind of user manual, and I've become friends with them over a decade or more, because I've got to know them really well. They've got to know me really well, and a bond of trust has formed. But unless you've been there with them for an absolute minimum of 7 years, minimum, then no, you have to be detached, because otherwise your best use to them is compromised. Does that make sense?
For sure, that definitely, and I noticed this as well, like through practice, like and through the longevity of clients that stick around, and through the ones that become friends and stop become clients. And so that, you know, that's what happens sometimes. And so it's important to be able to keep that kind of boundary.
Yes.
For the regiment. So with regards to the teaching aspect, which I find prolifically very much enjoyable, like I put on a 3-day workshop with other astrologers in Mexico a couple of months ago, and I love teaching it. I really feel like one of my set intentions is to bring it into the garden with the kids like who want to learn, and elders who want to learn, all age groups together, learning about how it all relates to the different herbs in the garden and all these different things, and connecting and playing, because I love that it's a tool for learning, a logic. And you call it a she. So you can see astrology everywhere in the environment when we go about. It's kind of it's a very psychedelic experience in a very mundane world. So it kind of gives us the opportunity to spiritualize the matter at hand. I feel astrology is once it opens your eyes. How do you have your relationship with how you can perceive astrology? For instance, obviously with a particular transit, you just see it everywhere. Like I've been sitting by the cathedral these past couple of days to have my lunch. Often I'll sit in the garden by preference, but Mars, you know, in Pisces, I think, and Venus, my ruling planet in Pisces, is very cathedral-esque. And so I notice these profound kinds of things that take place very frequently. And you see it externally beyond the choices that I will make as well. So I love seeing the psychedelic nature of astrology in the mundane reflection of the atmospherics around us.
I don't necessarily agree with you there. Firstly, I differentiate between psychedelic and psychotropic.
Okay, that's interesting.
Secondly, once you've studied astrology enough, you realize that it's nothing to do with psychedelics or psychotropics. That's a separate field that's similar but different. The advanced perception that decades of astrology gives you, the enhanced rather than advanced, the enhanced perception can be attained without recourse to any other form of consciousness stimulant.
I would agree. This is what maybe I used the wrong word in context, because or a word out of context. What I meant was, by knowing astrology, by practicing it every single day, by being immersed within it, by being slightly it's our modality, and so basically it allows us to see the world from another angle.
Yes, there I totally agree with you. But I would also add to that astrology is in a class of its own. There is nothing else appropriately similar to it. Every other form of divinatory art that I'm aware of, now you can argue for numerology, but every other form of divinatory art relies pretty much on intuition as its main source, whether it's using a tool such as the runes or the tarot, but it's still a divinatory art. Whereas astrology has both a numerical, symbolic basis and thousands of years of accumulated history. So it is not an art, but neither is it a science. It is a standalone system of both awareness of self and of prognostication used correctly. So to me, that makes it different to any other form of divinatory form of art.
So would you suggest that it's of profit to us to learn astrology?
Absolutely. It gives a detached, impersonal, objective perspective on oneself in a way that nothing else does. It uses an external frame of reference, i.e. the planets in the sky. I was talking to someone the other day about they're coming up to the fact that Pluto's going to be opposing their sun any within the next couple of years. And I said, yeah, I've had Pluto opposite my sun. And I knew about it. It was coming up for about 30 years before it happened. So for 30 years before it happened, I was like crapping myself. I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen to me. It's going to be horrible. And then it happened and it was horrible, but it made me stronger. It didn't kill me. And it makes you realize that for all of our wonderful technological abilities, for all of our skills and knowledge that we've learned, especially in this last 50 years, we can't stop the movement of the planets in the sky. They are outside of our ability to influence, and that they're going to have their way with us no matter what. Now, it is implausible to say, okay, because that planet in the sky, that small lump of rock or that big lump of gas out there is moving to this position on your horoscope, it's going to cause that effect. Any scientist or astronomer would look at you and go, you're stupid. And I would understand why they say that. But as a metaphorical influence, as an influence which affects you in a way that is not so much just three-dimensional, but multi-dimensional and even quantum linked, where it exists over in many different fields of reference, yes, it's a valid way of expressing oneself. And also, the beauty of astrology is that once you've done enough charts, once you've been at it decades and decades, you've got undeniable statistics. How can Pluto, a planet the size or smaller than our moon and 4 billion miles away, how can that affect people the way it does? The logic and the rational, the scientific, the astronomical would just go, that's silly. But it does. And I've got thousands of statistics and thousands of people who go, yeah, Pluto absolutely hammered me, but it also transformed, regenerated, and rebirthed me. And statistics don't lie. So in a way, even to this day, I don't know how it works. I don't know how astrology works. I know it does. I don't understand astrology, but I know it. And I sense it and I intuit it, I feel with it, I work with it, I'm conscious of it. But when it boils down to hard logic, no, I don't understand it. Anyone who says they understand astrology seems to me they're naturally limiting their abilities. It's more than an understanding. There's a meaning to it, which is deeper than understanding. And there's a knowing of it, which is deeper than both the understanding and the meaning. But it takes time, years, decades, and consistency of experience to reach that comprehension and that depth. And it never stops. The older you get, the more you learn, the more you know, and the more you realize what you don't know. So it's an adventure of consciousness. I love it. It's given me purpose. I wouldn't be alive if astrology hadn't found me. I wouldn't be alive by now. I'm sure I'd have been done something stupid, or I don't know, but it's given me something to live for. Long may it continue.
It's a brilliant interest. It's all immersing, isn't it? I feel like, to me, this body is something which it's got so much sensitivity to it. Then this astrology is a bit like the handbook to the body and for our experience within Earth. And so they say that we're star seeds, and I think that the frequency that we hold is often very potent for what we're seeing reflected, whether we're projecting or assuming, and things like this. And so with astrology, what we can find is reassurance, because it has an opportunity for us to have a greater relationship with ourselves, which is probably the most meaningful thing that we can render, is a great relationship with ourselves. I think those doubts will continue to always come up, but as we process, we're able to gain more buoyancy, more reassurance, more stability in our connection to the source, which astrology is a brilliant foundation for.
I absolutely concur with you on that. Absolutely. The number of times I've done an analysis of someone's chart and they turned around and say, I've always known this inside myself, but it's so good to have independent corroboration of that. You know, they've always known. Sometimes when people are really in tune with themselves and you do a reading for them and they say, you haven't told me anything I didn't already know, but you've explained it in a way that no one's ever done before, then that to me is a validation of astrology. Because as I'm fond of saying to all my clients, look, the planets impel, they don't compel. There is nothing cast in stone here. There is no fate or destiny here with astrology. It is a matter of choice and free will, but it's also a great blueprint for potential. And it shows ways in which you can both enhance and accelerate your experiences to become a far better human being than you would otherwise be. And at the end of the day, why are you here? What's your purpose on planet? Is it to make money, have sex, have fast cars, have pretty big houses and pretty boyfriends or girlfriends? Is it about consciousness expansion, consciousness enhancement, growing as an individual? And where's the dividing line between those things? And that's the matter of choice.
Choice is the key, isn't it? And I feel that astrology reminds us that we do have that, and that's the great thing about it.
Yeah, there's the magic. Yeah, when you realize it's a choice.
This is a theme for me this week. How magic can be practical, magic can be grounded when you do take actions that bring you into this solid knowing that I'm moving towards something's changing. This Taurus energy, which we're currently now within, especially with an earthy moon that we've got for the next day or so. It's really like, hey, how can we work with foundations that anchor frequencies that we know that is giving us traction and progressing us? It doesn't have to be that we exhaust ourselves. We can enjoy the work that we do because we know that it is giving us the opportunity to get into the maturation of whatever we're putting our energy into.
I've got a list of maybe 3 books that I consider the most influential books I've ever read. And one of them is by I wouldn't say a friend, but a colleague of mine whom I have the utmost respect for, a lady called Serena Roney Dougal, who is the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. And she rewrote her thesis for her PhD as a book called Where Science and Magic Meet. And it is one of the most important books ever written. She's brilliant.
This is what kind of brought me into astrology, actually, because I was researching, you know, like the Bruce Liptons, the Joe Dispensers, and I knew of astrology and I watched a few horoscopes and things. I was probably watching you, but I hadn't started learning it at that point. But it was the knowledge of the quantum world and how this works.
Bruce Lipton wrote The Biology of Belief, which is a really important book as well. And how belief can actually, through how we can influence our lives, our bodies, and our futures by the strength of the positive mental attitude, PMA. Absolutely. Absolutely. Dream it in. Or dream in a life of addiction and McDonald's and burgers and sex and power and all the darker or negative or less but the denser stuff. You know.
So you say astrology saved your life, but it saved me from a Sun Neptune kind of experience. I was always going to punk rock shows, watching lots of concerts and things like that. Great stuff, but it didn't give me my own craft, my own sense of self, like being an astrologer does. And it took me such a long time to classify myself as that. I was reading books on YouTube, practicing getting my voice, learning how to talk about it. And that's really building a muscle in itself. And then, as you say, I've been reading charts for like 6 years now with clients. And so that's really allowed me to get confident in my practice. I know my ability to serve, and I know that astrology can provide for me, as well as I know that it can provide for anybody who takes the time to learn it as well, not just financially, but within the bond that it gains us within our experience. And so I've got a question for you, as I know that we haven't got too much more time before I've got to let you get off. And these are about our current times that we're working with within 2020, without being squanderous of a question that's only for a couple of days, felt into quite a bold question. And it's about dealing with the paradox of energies that we're working with this year, with this metaphysical kind of Piscean energy that we're about to have a whole load of just in a couple of days when the moon swings by. But there's a predominance of it this year in general, with Jupiter and Neptune, currently Mars and Venus as well. But Jupiter's going to go off into Aries. It's a whole different energy. It's really about the self-orientation. It's going to be there for a while before it goes retrograde. And then Mars will go retrograde in Gemini.
Oh, yeah.
So the question is, with all this going on, and Pluto soon to station retrograde almost at the culminative degree. So this Capricorn traditional archetype, whether we're seeing health, whether we're seeing education, whether we're seeing a government, whether we're seeing a monetary system, whether we're seeing astrology and how it correlates to the body and all of these things. How are we going to see the shift of traditions with Saturn squaring the nodes? What are we going to find that maybe had been not in the public awareness brought forward? What are we going to see that allows us to re-establish the wealth of maybe astrology and put into better practice? These are just like some kind of questions I'm throwing out a lot to you there with all these Sagittarian.
Right. So the way of looking at this overall is to imagine yourself on a spinning circle, but spiraling upwards. Okay, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, to use my favorite Saturn definition. The current status, first of all, in the short term, in the immediate short term of this massive lineup in Pisces that's coming up in a couple of days' time, is in many ways a kind of end game scenario for so many people, where we're so sick of some of the things that are going on in the world. But there is this wave of compassion and empathy that's really springing up. And
you say even for them, even for the people that have done tyrannical acts in the world, we're having compassion for them because potentially they were abused before they did the abusing themselves also. Yeah,
but you can't have light without dark. You can't have good without bad. They're equal and opposite. The idea is to get the consensus elevated, not one arm of it, but all of it. We can't leave people behind. We've got to take everyone with us. And yes, there's this big Aries thing coming up with Jupiter and then Mars in Aries over June and July. And that's going to bring a great more dynamicism. It's probably going to bring a lot more aggression and violence, but it's also going to bring a lot more enthusiasm and vitality for change.
A very interesting moment that we have eventually with Mars in Aries, with Jupiter, but Venus in Taurus, and even after the retrograde, Mercury in Gemini, everything in its domicile home sign, even Saturn and Neptune too.
Yes. Especially with the Mars retrograde in Gemini that's coming up at the end of the year, Mars will be in Gemini for 7 months instead of 7 weeks. But look at the big picture. Look at the long term. 2 to 3 years from now, Pluto will move into Aquarius. Uranus will move into Gemini. Saturn and Neptune together at the same time will move from Pisces into Aries. Whole shift from feminine to masculine. Massive. I've never seen anything like it. And there's never been a time in the last 2,000-3,000 years with such a concentrated shift of energy. And if there has been a time like this in the past, it's been at a time when Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were not discovered, so weren't known about consciously. Since these archetypes of the unconscious and subconscious and the transpersonal have become developed just since the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in the last 100 to 200 years, there's never been a time in conscious human history with such a dynamic, compressed, concentrated period of intense change. This is going to happen, and it's going to have an effect. It's just a question of whether that effect manifests in a way that is disassociated with the reality, where we get war and economic downturn and bigger gaps between the haves and the have-not, or if there's some type of revolution of consciousness where we see an end to borders and an end to monetary extremes, and we see a much greater growth in a willingness for humans to interact with each other in an integrated, assimilated, and holistic way. Because without that, what's the point of the human experiment? If we can't grow as a species and enhance consciousness, why are we alive? It's not just about fast cars and loads of money.
Well, this question I pondered to you, and the bandwidth of it for time is, broad or even impendingly soon. And that is that a monetary crisis that has been plugged up since Pluto went into Capricorn, a financial world reset, which we have actually seen, in a sense, detonated since 2020, if you ask certain people, including myself. But the point being that we're at the end. This Pluto Capricorn archetype's hanging by a thread, and it's, in a sense, renormalizing normal with Saturn square the nodes in Aquarius. And so we're looking at valuable things to include into traditions, because if you consider Saturn in its own second house, or Capricorn in its own second house. But my point being is that we're changing our identification with so many things, with this Mars retrograde, with how we deal with information, with Pluto, going through this external authority archetype. How do we find that we can actually work with this energy in a way which is beneficial for us moving forward? And I feel like it could be that if you and I, let's talk it down to brass tacks, there's no money anymore, for instance, there's no dollar, there's no pound, and it happened this year. And we'd be like, okay, well, priority for people now isn't to buy an astrology reading with their little bit of resources, but we've still got skills which are needed. People need counseling, people need reassurance, and people can use astrology. And so it has got prowess, all skills and trades do. And so this is about relearning how to trade, relearning how to provide for those people which we're able to exchange with.
The whole monetary exchange, 8,000 years ago, Joe Bloggs had his sheep in a cave and he wanted to go off and see his mate, and he didn't want to take his sheep with him. So he said to his friend, look, will you look after my sheep? Here's a note saying that you've got ownership of his sheep. But his mate didn't want to stick around for a long time. So he gave that note to someone else, who then sold it on to someone else, and it became tender, it became legal exchange. That's how money started. And now Uranus in Taurus, just in the last 5 years of Uranus, 4 or 5 years of Uranus in Taurus, the whole idea of crypto, where there are no secrets, where every transaction is visible and public, where there are no banks or bankers, to me, that's the future. And it's not going to collapse the existing financial system overnight this year, or even in the next 3 or 4 years, 10 years down the line, particularly when Saturn hits Uranus at the end of Gemini, I think, off the top of my head. Yeah, it would be in about 10 years' time. That's going to bring a massive revolution in the way we communicate, network, and everything's going to become so transparent. The days of secrets are coming to an end.
So can I gauge your vision? I like what you're saying.
Carry on.
I like what you're saying. So I would try to gauge your vision. Do you think it's going to be more of a gradual progression? Maybe there be both options with regards to currency, how we do our trades and exchange. And this is so that we can actually gain trust, which is so important, as we've already touched upon, within ourselves and the external world which we're interacting with, whether it's a banking facility or how we, do our interactions via a phone rather than a cash point and a card. Or obviously these things are going to be obsolete and we're going to be laughed at by the new kids on the block, because this is all becoming outdated in the next few blinks of an eye.
Well, that's evolution for you, and the acceleration of evolution that's going on now. When I was a kid, when I was born, there was something like just over 2 billion people on planet. Now there's 7.5, 8, pushing 10. When I was a kid, spirituality meant going to Sunday school. When I was a kid, technology meant having a little brown box made of wood with a screen on where there was flickering black and white pictures, the first televisions. Now look what we got. Look how much things have accelerated just in the last 60 years. And it's not a straight line. It's an escalatory curve. And it's almost at prime vertical. And anybody knows that once that graph hits prime vertical and it can't go any faster, only one or two things can happen. It either collapses in on itself and starts going the other way, which perhaps happened around the time of the flood, 10, 12,500 years ago, or it exceeds the limits of the graph. It goes beyond the boundaries of the graph, which suggests that we go beyond the three-dimensional reality. We all become a lot more naturally intuitive, sensitive, empathic, and we can all sense a lot more of what's really going on around us, which is why I say there will be no more secrets. There will be no more domination, manipulation, control, because everyone will be able to sense when something isn't right, or when someone is lying, or when there's something going on in the background. We will all know, and we all know it anyway. It's just a question of trusting our senses. I'm learning to differentiate a lot more, especially since the discovery of Chiron, with the human intuition that starts at the solar plexus and goes north, and the animal instinct, which starts at the navel and goes south. And we all like to think of ourselves as human, but we live in an animal body that has a gut instinct. And the more we're trusting our instincts, the more empowered we become as individuals, and the less disempowered we become by other people, the state, the corporates, whatever. So again, it's about trusting ourselves. And then we come back to the astrology, because astrology teaches us to become self-empowered. It's a circle, it's a spiral.
I love what you shared there, because the medicine of the gut, the belly, the nurturing trust, which in a sense we have forgotten. It's become the donkey of the family, of the body, this energy, you could suggest. Like our feelings, it's like, you've got to be stoic, don't trust them. But actually, these feelings, they tell us so much, and actually they guide us. We're guided by the navel, like the Navy are the greatest, you could suggest, because they're guided by the stars. But when we trust our feelings and our guts, and as you said, you just shared a very useful piece of information. When it's spiraling up, it's a certain thing to trust, and when it's spiraling down, maybe it's more mind or carnal, or maybe it's more survival instinct. And so this is really powerful information which we can learn to reintegrate, because we've been so concerned with, paying the bills, getting the food on the table, all the this external stuff. It's about getting back into the body and realizing that this is an opportunity to be guided by the vessel that we're within.
Indeed. Hey, on a completely different subject, I love your wheel.
Yes.
Who made it for you? Did you do it yourself?
Well, a supporter of my channel, Unifying Perspectives on YouTube, Roots, who also has a channel, she's a Capricorn lady, she does these charts for people, and sent me this one, and it's really nice, isn't it?
It's lovely. It's lovely. The one I've got is made by an artist friend of mine called Jean, who's been doing astrological wheels since the late 70s. And yeah, it's nice that there's people out there still doing this.
Yes, I was, when I first got into learning my chart, before I could read charts properly, like I wanted to draw them, I wanted to be able to create them. And it's very important, because I think it's a meditation, isn't it? It's a bit like this Wiccan practice of sewing or whatever brings you into that meditative state.
Right. So this is where you and I are probably going to disagree, because for the first 20 years of my astrological life, there were no computers. There was no calculators. So I had to do everything by hand. And when you draw a chart by hand, when you work it out by hand with all the tables, and then you draw it by hand and you put each bit in, each bit becomes, it's got valence. You learn about it as you put it in. Whereas when you just punch stuff into a computer and go, right, date, time, place of birth, boom, oh, there's the chart. You've missed a vital part of the experience by not constructing the chart. Now, if you can do it by hand and do it with computer, you've got the best of both worlds. But I maintain, if you cannot calculate and draw a horoscope by hand without computers, you are not an astrologer. I can go out into my local park and go, right, there is the ascendant coming up at that point there on the horizon. There's the descendant. Right, so that's south, that's the midheaven. There's Mars and Jupiter. Look, you can see they're in square to each other. And if you can't do that in the sky, and if you can't draw it by hand, you're not an astrologer. Now, all the young people who only have got computers would no doubt disagree with me. And I'll be just an old fart, but I still stick to that.
I think that's nice and bold. Like I definitely tell the time by my sky clock. Like I read the sky, I know what's going up before the sun. I see it, I observe it, I know of it. I know what's setting in the west. I don't know why they don't call Halloween West Star. I know that we call the spring holiday East Star. I don't know why we don't call the one in October West Star. I would, but like there we go.
That's an interesting way of putting it. And actually, perhaps it's a good point at this time to say to people watching this in the next 2 or 3 days that if you're up early in the morning, wherever you are in the world, and you're looking east over this between now and the end of April, you will see a spectacular light show. The moon, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Well, it's actually Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Saturn in that order in the sky, but they will be in a straight line in the east, and you can see all of them either with the naked eye if you're not in a city, or if you are in a city you'll need binoculars. But and then the moon's going to be there in the next couple of days as well, so it's going to be a spectacular light show.
Yeah, especially a waning moon. I'm a fan of the crescent, which it will be eventually, and I prefer, like I'm an evening star kind of guy, but like like the morning star or the dawn star, it's brilliant because they've all been there gathering these past few months since January, and now they're all visible for us there, and it's a different omen, isn't it? It sets the tone for a different type of day because they're going to be actually streaming across the top of the sky while we're living out our day-to-day experience.
Exactly.
It's a whole different energetic.
Absolutely. Every year, COVID permitting, but every year for the last 20, 30, 40 years, government laws and COVID permitting, I go to Stonehenge at winter solstice because it's important to me. It just is. And a couple of years ago, as you walk down the avenue in the dark to Stonehenge, there was a brilliant Venus in the sky. And then we got a great sunrise, and then we walked back up the avenue in the light. So you walk there in the dark, you come back in the light, just as the sun reaches its lowest point of the horizon. It's the start of a new year. And there's something really symbolic about that. Anybody who can should make an effort to go to their nearest sacred monument at the moment of winter solstice to celebrate the end of the old year and the start of the new. I feel, because it links you to the earth, but it also gives you a really good example of the relationship between heaven and earth, and your position as the interface between those two energies.
It's been really interesting the past 2 winter solstices for me, who spent the predominant part of my experience in the UK, where I have a Saturn line as well. I just had that on the astrocartography, but like. So I witnessed the Great Conjunction and the most recent winter solstice in Mexico, which is actually almost directly under the equator.
Yes.
So it's completely different type of vibration and energy, but it's been obviously very interesting to perceive the stars from that angle, and also to be there in the spring and over the equinoxes when the sun's directly above as well. So
yes. I've been to Singapore quite a few times in the last few years, working and teaching, and to see the sun and the full moon directly overhead, as opposed to sort of at that angle on the horizon, because from the northern hemisphere that's where it is. Whereas directly overhead, when you're on the equator, is an amazing experience. So yes, I can see how Mexico, to see the Great Conjunction of Jupiter Saturn from there, would have been an awesome thing. Because from here, of course, it was like there, but to see it from Mexico where it's there would have been,
it was tremendous. Like the eclipse the prior year, which was a solar eclipse on my birthday, conjunct Jupiter, set me up for that whole trip, right?
Yeah.
It was really great, and also to be able to talk to other people who weren't astrologers and to be able to share it with people who care, because I don't think people would have been out there looking at that time of the year in the UK or consider astrologers somebody they wanted to talk to so much. So it was a really good experience, and I look forward to doing more teachings and things like that. But I'd love to catch up with you again, Paul, and do more conversations like this.
Yeah, but Steve, not Paul.
For goodness sake, it's so rude of me. I've got Mercury Uranus. I'll slip on a banana skin if you give me the opportunity.
That's fine. That's fine. I've got a mouth like a bucket sometimes myself. There is that big eclipse coming up later this year. I think it's November the 8th. It's a total eclipse. I'm not sure if it's an eclipse. I think it's an eclipse of it's an eclipse of the moon, total eclipse of the moon at 16 degrees of Taurus, I think. Might be an eclipse of the sun at 16 Scorpio, but it's directly linking with Uranus, and that's a stinker. That's going to be a big one to watch. That's November the 8th, I think. But that's the last remaining big challenge of a kind of homeopathic point this year. Yes, Mars in Aries is going to create a lot of trouble, but that's going to be over a period of 6 weeks.
But I'll be distinct with you as we close this out. For this last, I feel that there's 3 pinnacle things that leads to that. And that is this eclipse, this opening cycle. These eclipses that we're opening up with. And then the Mars, Uranus, Rahu, North Node conjunction in between.
Yeah.
And then we get that as you humdinger, because it's so tight with Uranus and the moon in its favorite sign in Taurus. It's just going to be, wow, what can we expect? It's about maybe catching up emotionally and letting go. And sometimes when we let go of a massive emotional weight, the load time for the manifestations and in the reality really speed up, and we managed to make a lot of progress in a quantum manner.
I was in Cornwall on the 11th of August 1999 to see the total eclipse of the sun over Britain, over Cornwall, and at the actual moment of the eclipse, I was just dancing on barefoot on the earth. And I like to think I'll be doing that on the eclipse on November the 8th. I like to think that. We'll see.
Would you come to, I've got to say, would you come to Tulum, Mexico to teach in January? Is that something that we could persuade you for, to teach a presentation?
I would be happy to do so, as long as I don't end up out of pocket.
We'll pay you for sure. I mean, I'm not sure if we could cover the whole airfare, but we'll certainly pay you, a few hundred. We can come to terms with it. We'll converse.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. Yeah, I've never been to Mexico. I've been to many, many countries, but I've never been to Mexico, and I would love to go.
Well, that would be great. We had about 6 astrologers, including a Mayan astrologer, a numerologist, and a selection of great people. And it'd be fantastic to have you on board for this upcoming one in the winter that we're moving towards. We're going to spend a lot more time promoting it and feel that it can be, more of a great spectacle and experience for everybody. So
a bit of a party, because I've got lots of clients in the southern part of Arizona, New Mexico, California, who I'm sure would be interested in coming. Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about that another time.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and energy today, Steve. Where can people get hold of you? I will put the links in the description box below, but if you could vocalize it. I mean, if you're putting this out on your channel, my name's Philip. You can catch out me and a whole load of interviews and astrology videos on Unifying Perspectives YouTube channel. But Steve, you are a cornerstone of YouTube. Where can people find you if they haven't already?
My ego's big enough already. Don't boost it anymore. I've got a website where you can find out all about my readings at stevejudd.co, and there's a link there to all the courses and teaching courses that I do on Zoom. And my email is steve@stevejudd.co. That's co, not .com, but .co.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for making this happen, and thank you again for all of your contributions thus far. I'm excited for the continued prolific astrological reports that you share.
Bless you, my friend. I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Cheerio. Thank you.